Welcome to the Carbonite Jedi, where the Force will be with you always. Today I'm going to be talking about Zack Snyder and an article I found where it says Zack Snyder says he pitched Rebel Moon to Kathleen Kennedy prior to Disney acquisition. So that's pretty interesting. I'm curious why, well, if it was prior to the Disney, I'm sure Disney was like, we're going to go our own way. But he would have had to pitch it to Kathleen Kennedy, who went from, Lucasfilm to Disney Lucasfilm. I just don't know why she didn't say, okay, let's do it. But there's a lot of things I don't know why she just didn't say, let's do it. Anyway, real quick, I got a joke for you. Where did Luke get his cybernetic hand? At the secondhand store. I hope that brightened your day. Anyway, if you like this content, give me a thumbs up on the video and subscribe. I really appreciate you subscribing, and it really helps the channel. All right, let's get to the meat of this video. All right, there it is. There's Zack Snyder, and it said he pitched Rebel Moon to Kathleen Kennedy prior to Disney acquisition. This was January 12th. Actually, this came out today. Wow. As you might have heard by now, the story of Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon was once pitched to Lucasfilm as a Star Wars movie. During the promotional campaign of the film, he discussed the topic briefly, but didn't go into a lot of detail. And as a side note, I haven't seen it yet. I plan to, but a lot of people I talked to said it really, really, really mirrors a lot of Star Wars-ish type things, like the first movie, Star Wars. And, them going to a cantina, and there's a wizard like Obi-Wan there, and they said it just mirrors Star Wars so much. During the promotional campaign for the film, he discussed the topic briefly, but didn't go into a lot of detail. Speaking on the DGA Director's Cut podcast via the playlist, Zack Snyder finally opened up about it when talking to Louis Lederer, who also has experience pitching to Lucasfilm. Apparently, Snyder pitched the idea even before Disney bought the company, which he had no idea would happen. At the time, I pitched it, and Kathleen Kennedy said, "That sounds really cool." I remember saying something like, "Is there any way it could be rated R? Is that a thing?" And she went, I'm not sure. "So you're saying there's a chance?" And she said, "Well, let's talk more and see how it evolves." And I was like, okay. I did have a second meeting where ILM had done all these paintings reflecting what my idea would look like in the Star Wars universe. And then I was thinking, see, this is cool. And then 2 days later, I read in the trades that they sold Lucasfilm and Disney now owns it. And I was like, what? That's weird. No one said anything about that. A heads up would have been cool of some small amount. And then, of course, they were like, look, we love your idea, but we're going to go in a new, we're going to do something else. There he is filming Rebel Moon. It is widely reported back in 2013 that Kennedy and Snyder had met to talk about a Star Wars movie, but nothing came of it. Snyder's reps denied any current involvement and insisted he was busy finishing up Man of Steel at the time. Even Snyder's wife and producing partner, Deborah Snyder, told him it was all for the best. My wife was like, see, this is the best thing that ever happened to you. This is great news. You're fine. Plus, when were you going to do that movie? Because you're busy. So it just fell back a little bit. It disappeared for a while. I would still think about it. I would still talk to her about it. I would say, what if this? And my wife would say, you're still ranting about that space movie? But it was tenacious. In the end, it probably worked out for him as he got to make the film he wanted and for a different studio. Still, Snyder thought he could save Star Wars after, in his own words, it had lost itself during the prequels. We were working on the editorial of Man of Steel. I said to Christopher Nolan, remember telling Chris in the edit, I had this idea. I'm just going to call Kathleen Kennedy, and I'm just going to pitch her this Star Wars movie I have an idea for. because at the time, that was before the Disney sale. It was after the prequels. Star Wars was quiet. Star Wars was in a quiet mode. And I remember thinking, they need me. He laughed self-depreciatingly. This is cool. I'm going to fix Star Wars. Also because I had some issues with some of the prequel decisions. I'm not going to say what it was, but I just felt like Lucasfilm had gone astray a little bit. I know that's sacrilegious to say, but that was my feeling. The second part of Rebel Moon is due out on Netflix in April. I don't think it's sacrilegious at all. I think he's a great director. I think he could have come in with some fantastic ideas. He probably did. Probably made Kathleen feel inadequate, and she was like, oh, well, that's great, but we're going to go in a different way. They probably would have fought the whole time he was making that movie. I know Jon Favreau had issues with Kathleen Kennedy coming in on The Mandalorian, either season 1 or beginning of season 2. And I think he left because she was being so micromanagement of the show. And they begged him to come back. So he did, but he told them that he didn't want Kathleen Kennedy on the set because he didn't really like that micromanaging helicopter person over his shoulder. But yeah, I think they should have got Zack Snyder, man. He does some fantastic directing, and especially with him doing, Marvel or the DC universe, the Zack Snyder cut. That was really good. And him doing Rebel Moon, which I haven't seen, but I am going to see it. The trailer looks fantastic, and it's a 2-part movie. Yeah, Disney has this whole thing where they listen to these great directors and they just say, well, that sounds great and all, but we're going to go in a different direction. And I just wonder how many fantastic Star Wars movies have we missed because they didn't have Zack Snyder. They didn't have the directors from the Game of Thrones, or they haven't gone out and asked John Woo or the director of John Wick, who said he would love to take a stab at making some Star Wars movies. A lot of people think, Star Wars is irredeemable now because Disney's like put them in the mud and the poop and everything else and just dragged it through it, and there's no way to redeem it. Somebody told me that they'd rather go watch Warhammer, which I'd love to see Warhammer too. But there's always going to be a place in my heart for Star Wars. And I think that if they got the right people and took the wrong people out, they could redeem it. It could be redeemed. You don't necessarily need to have George Lucas behind this helm, but I mean, sometimes they go to him for questions and what his thoughts and ideas were, and you don't always have to go with his ideas and thoughts, but I know he had a vision for Star Wars. That's my rant for today. Tell me what you think about Zack Snyder, and would he have done a good job making the Star Wars movie? Probably would have been totally different than Rebel Moon, or at least parts of it would be, because it would have been in the Star Wars universe. But I don't think it would have been any worse than 7, 8, and 9 by a long shot. So let me know what you think of Zack Snyder or any other director coming in. Who would be your director to do Star Wars besides George Lucas, of course? And look at some of my other videos. I talked about the Game of Thrones directors pitching back in 2019 for their video, or for their movie. I did that video yesterday, I think, and a couple other cool videos. Well, that's it for this video. But come back for more sci-fi and Star Wars content, more Black Series unboxings, more live streams, and more live movie watches. And give me a thumbs up and a subscribe. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend, and remember, the Force will be with you always. Thank you so much for watching.